Committee of the Whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 to order. With roll call, please.
Betts.
Here.
Collier.
Here.
Cavelli.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here.
Weinhammer.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now moving to the public comment. Is there anybody here that'd like to address the Committee of the Whole? I think we got you now. Thank you. First matter on the agenda is a discussion on an ordinance amending section 10.32.005, a parking prohibited of municipal code for the 490 feet of West Margaret Terrace of Eldon Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. So this evening we have a few traffic-related items for discussion at committee. Both items were brought to village staff by residents who had some requests and concerns regarding the ability for on-street parking on two of our streets. The first item, as the mayor mentioned, is on West Margaret Terrace. This is in the center of town, south of Three Oaks and east of Silver Lake Road. There is a section about 490 feet of West Margaret Terrace west of Eldon. So that's this area in the exhibit highlighted in yellow. That is the focus of the proposed change that was requested by the resident. You might recall back in 2018, the village code was amended to restrict parking on one side of the street for roadways that were very narrow and where it was difficult for emergency vehicles and through traffic to navigate when cars were parked on both sides of the street. West Margaret Terrace was one of those streets between Eldon Drive and Silver Lake Road. That street's about 26 feet or so wide. So the proposed recommendation that was implemented to restrict parking on the north side of the street was completed. Since then, we had a resident request that last 490 feet or so be removed from the restriction because the road does widen slightly in that stretch of the street. It does match the roadway cross section and the width to the east of Eldon, where the restriction is not in place for one side of the roadway. Staff has reviewed the request, and given that the width is consistent with other areas of the neighborhood that do allow parking on both sides, and the fact that there is sufficient separation from that area to the nearby James Wade Park, that this accommodation could be made if the board wishes to make the ordinance amendment. Prior to the committee meeting, we did send letters out to the property owners around the proposed change, and we did receive, aside from the initial request from the one resident, we did receive one email today that was provided on the dais and also emailed to the village board. That one resident, who does live in the stretch highlighted in yellow, so this area is directly in front of their home, they are not in favor of the proposed amendment, specifically with some safety concerns regarding the hills, the use of the roadway by bikers and children on skateboards and so forth, and then the tendency for that area to be used for some through traffic to get to Silver Lake Road in particular. So that being said, Chief Bill and I are happy to answer any questions you might have with regards to this proposal to remove the restriction and allow parking on both sides of West Margaret Terrace, or 490 feet west of Eldon.
I think too, some of those comments that we had received via email from that one resident, those are things that we can look at, certainly with policing of traffic that's going too fast, through their cut through traffic. Right. So the chief obviously was aware of that email that was sent in, and we'll take a look at it. So,
and just to kind of put this in context as well, is we haven't had school in session for a while, and a lot of our complaints from residents tend to involve those individuals that are traveling to or from the high school. And the other part of this equation as well is that the buses, that was one of the reasons that we did restrict parking to one side of the roadways, because the buses were having a difficult time navigating those particular roadways as well.
I got Eric, you said 26 feet. What is it widened to, and what's the standard for double-side parking?
I believe the roadway widens to about 28 feet, which would be pretty much the minimum distance you would need for cars parked on both sides, and about 9 to 10 feet between those cars for a vehicle like a school bus or a garbage truck or an emergency vehicle to pass through.
Is
The
there,
main issues that occur with that width would be if you tend to get cars that, like several cars that would park in a line on both sides of the roadway, where there's fewer gaps between the parked cars for vehicles to pass each other and navigate that two-way traffic.
is there other streets in Cary where you have a split where one side's no parking and then it goes to parking on both sides already?
Yeah, there are numerous roadways,
Numerous
Second
like
Street, Sunset, and then James Way, all the streets that run east-west between Eldon and Silver Lake Road, for the most part, are restricted on one side of the street.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we enacted ordinance, not sure if you were on the board at that time, Trustee Collier, but we had enacted ordinances that would restrict parking on one side of the street, and it's actually worked out
Very
fairly
well.
well in the locations that we've done that, so.
There was some pain in the beginning, but it ended up working out
Yeah.
very well.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other thoughts from the village board?
Sure, I had a comment. In listening to where we're at and reading the response from the one neighbor that was not in favor, I see a lot of these issues as things that can be, as Jake was saying, policed by, looked at if there's speeding going on. You know, we look at that and throw something up there to kind of make people a little bit aware of it. I think that when you look at it where it widens to 28 feet, and we're saying that from that area all the way to First Street, that doesn't restrict parking. So I'm comfortable with it going up until the park there, so that I think that there is enough space there. I actually thought that that's what we had done last year, that I thought we started at the James Way Park. I didn't realize that we were all the way back, all the way up to Eldon there on that portion. So I'm actually in favor of going ahead and making this adjustment to our code.
Trustee Betts or Collier, any? You're fine with it?
I'm good now.
Okay.
Trustee,
Trustee Weinhammer? Yeah. Go ahead.
okay. So I'm actually not in favor of it. I did read the email, and I do agree with the person who wrote the email. And I did speak to somebody that I do know who does live on Margaret, and their concern was the cars being parked on the road and the park right there in the hill. They said that the kids do dart in and out of there, and that was somebody separate from the unit. So I would not be in favor of allowing parking to be permitted on both sides of the street.
So you want to keep it the way it is?
Correct.
Okay. Trustee Kraus, any comments?
I agree. I'm not in favor of making the change at this time.
Trustee Cavalli?
My question is did this request for this restriction to be lifted, did it come from a resident, or is this just something that staff evaluated and felt it was best?
I believe it came from a resident.
Came from a resident,
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
I believe the resident's concern was that we allow the both side parking just east of that. It's the same size street, and they thought that they would be able to have parking on either side of the street on the upper part of West Margaret Terrace, because the lower part of West Margaret Terrace narrows closer to the park, where it wouldn't allow two-way traffic for an emergency vehicle if cars were parked on both sides. So
And that's why it was restricted in the first place, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, then I probably would be also not in favor of lifting the restriction.
Okay. I guess that we have a tie here. I spent a lot of time driving back and forth over there. I am also in favor of making the amendment makes good sense. What we do just right across the intersection, allowing the same thing for the same size road makes sense to me. And it is, I think it's a little bit, seems to be a little bit wider than the 28 feet there. So we will move this to village board under items for separate action.
If I may, one question for the committee, and we will bring this back at the next board meeting for a separate action discussion. Would it help alleviate some of the concerns if instead of 490 feet, which is in yellow there, we perhaps open up that on-street parking on the north side a little bit closer to Eldon, maybe a couple lots further to the east, so there's more separation from the park?
I would be open.
And further up the hill.
Yes, I'd be in favor of that.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
This is Trustee Kraus. No, I wouldn't. That would sway me.
Okay.
I do have a question kind of relating back. This is Trustee Weinhammer relating back to Trustee Cabelli's question. The resident that is requesting this, this change, can you kind of give us an idea of where their home is? I mean, you don't have to say specifically, but like, is it one of the first couple ones? Is it back closer to Jamesway Park?
They are within the area highlighted in yellow, just as the other resident who was opposed to the change is in that same stretch.
Okay, and they just want to be able to park on the street because they can't park in their driveway or their garage, or what was the reason?
I think similar to the comments and the feedback from when we originally enacted these types of restrictions, the people that were opposed to it preferred to be able to park directly in front of their home. And that was probably the main reason most of them would object. I believe it's very likely that that's the exact reason as well for this request.
And we have also talked about, you know, with people parking in their garages and their driveways. And I am still concerned about people during the high school days parking there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it how it is.
Okay. That's fine. I believe that we prohibit high school parking there. Is that?
I believe when we restricted it, then we didn't have to have that.
Because there's one.
Right. So, I mean, that's another concern in regards to, I think the email that we received related to people attending the high school parking there and during school days. And again, you know, this is a matter that you kind of have to keep in context because we haven't had school in session for a while. So I don't know what the prevalence would be of individuals parking there as well.
Eric, one more question. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Did anybody else have a question? Jennifer?
Yes, sorry, you know, I was just watching the Board of Education meeting last night, so I'm going to say when I'm speaking my name, just since people can't see me, so Trustee Weinhammer. So how do you enforce knowing who's parking there for high school? I mean, do you have to wait for a resident to complain that high schoolers are parking there? Or, I mean, just curious how that works out.
I would say generally it is a complaint. There's been some recent developments as it relates to parking enforcement where there's a little bit of a restriction in regards to chalking tires any longer. So we'd have to observe it for whatever period of time or make it so that during school days there's no parking at that area and it makes it a little bit easier to enforce. So if there's a specific time period, it makes it a little bit more difficult to enforce it. For example, you know, 2-hour parking only versus no parking on school days or no parking Monday through Friday from X to Y.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My question was, in the picture, I can kind of see a fire hydrant on that no parking side already. How many fire hydrants are in that 490 feet?
I will tell you, that's really an Eric question, Director Morimoto, but I will tell you that that's the reason that we chose that side of the street to restrict is because that was where the fire hydrants were.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are hydrants on that side, and obviously removing this restriction would not change that perspective. There are also several driveways, so fire hydrants and driveways you cannot park in front of by, I believe it's the Illinois Vehicle Code, so that doesn't change as well. So if it were to be approved and the yellow area was allowed to have parking, I believe that hydrant is right here where the cursor is by this tree.
Okay, so you're losing some of that.
So there's
anyways?
a little section there plus a driveway adjacent to it. And then it does limit the parking that would be allowed to the larger gaps between driveways.
Okay, thank you.
We can refine this too before it's discussed at the village board meeting again as well, and show, the specific areas where the driveways are and the fire hydrants, so it's a little bit easier to see how many available spaces there are.
I was just trying to see how much they were actually gaining by opening that side for parking. How many
Sure.
cars can really park there?
Okay, we'll bring that back as items for separate action at the next village board meeting. Next, another.
Thank you, I've got one more. Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Okay, hold on, I just thought about the question. My question was, now, just so I have a clear understanding of this, since school is not in session right now, has there been the challenges that are discussed with cars, with, emergency vehicles if they have to get through? I understand right now there's no buses getting through, but right now with school not in session, has parking been any sort of issue with traffic?
Chief Finland?
I have not received at a staff level any complaints about that, nor just with our driving through town have any observations of any issues.
Yeah, and I would,
And the only reason why I'm asking that is because I think Chief Finland brought up a good point, is that if you decide to lift that restriction, if there is something in place to account for the school days and times for the school buses to pass through properly and not have any issues with kids, maybe that's a compromise we can look at.
And that condition does exist on those roads where parking is allowed. It is limited to, I believe, 2 hours on school days.
But if you-
signed appropriately that way. So if we did lift it, we would add that.
Okay, but if you restricted it to like full school day, let's say from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on one side of the roadway.
it would certainly make it easier to enforce. If it was Monday through Friday, instead of saying school days, Monday through Friday from 7 to 4, yes, that would be a much easier way to enforce it.
Right, rather than a 2-hour time limit or whatever that was, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On to another parking discussion on an ordinance amending section 10.32.005, parking prohibited of municipal code for a portion of Pine Circle in the Bright Oaks subdivision. Eric?
Thank you. This is another request that came from our residents in the Bright Oak subdivision. So this is a part of that development. It's in the far northern section of the townhomes there. Pine Circle does a loop and it ties into Oak Valley Drive on both ends. This request is regarding the sharp curve where Pine Circle hits the southern intersection at Oak Valley Drive. Their main concerns were the fact that there are a series of cars that are frequently parked on that curve, and they're parked on the inside of the curve because of the large number of driveways that limits the number of spaces that are on the other side of the road. And with all those cars parked, the resident was concerned that there were safety issues due to visibility blocked by all those vehicles, not only for cars that are passing the parked cars and traveling through that narrow street in the neighborhood, but also because of the fact that there are several pedestrians that tend to walk in the roadway because there are no sidewalks in this development because of the limited width of right-of-way there. So the request from the resident was to restrict parking on the inside of that curve. Staff reviewed the request and did observe on several occasions the conditions that were reported, where it wasn't just an occasional car parked here or there. There tended to be multiple cars parked in series in that inside curve. You'll note, you did a better job with the exhibits. There's an existing fire hydrant there on the inside of the curve, as well as some off-street guest parking that's been integrated with the development. So the request was for the inside of the curve to be restricted. We are also suggesting that if implemented, that restriction go extend past the curb and through the guest parking as well. Because when cars are parked, for instance, right here, only 2 cars will fit between this driveway and the guest parking. It is difficult for the cars coming out of that guest parking to see around the vehicles for oncoming traffic. So that was the request, and we welcome any feedback from the committee if it's something that would be, that the board would like to entertain.
Any feedback here?
I'm fine with it.
Good.
Yeah, my only concern, which I'm just curious, is if cars are parking there all the time, where are these cars going to park? I don't know if is it that there just no one's parking in the driveways? Do we have any idea?
I don't know. When I drove by there were several cars there. There was, there's driveways that are there. There is that visitor parking. When I drove by there was nobody parked in the visitors parking.
Well, then I err on the side of safety on that. I mean, if it's only 26 feet wide, that's, narrower than the other one we're talking about. So to me, that's a safety issue. So I'm in favor of it.
Any other trustees have any comments on this?
This is trustee Kraus. I'm in favor of it too.
This is trustee Weinhammer, and I am also in favor of it.
This is Kim Cavelli. Thank you for providing the visual. I think that really helps, the picture of the cars. And I agree, I think it is a safety hazard, so I'm in favor of it as well.
Okay, we'll put that on the consent agenda next village board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Betts.
Yes.
Collier.
Yes.
Cavelli.
Yes.
Kraus.
Yes.
McAlpine.
Yes.
Weinhammer.
Yes.
Thank you. We are adjourned.